Okay, good day everyone, and welcome to Fairstone's panel on Women and Financial Literacy, Embracing Equity. My name is Amir Gorgi. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Fairstone, and I'm also the executive sponsor of Fairstone's Women's Committee. As such, I am committed to helping this employee-led group build a diverse pipeline around our organization's parity goals, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion. I decided to get involved in this important initiative because I owe many of my professional successes to the incredible women with whom I've worked with and learned from throughout my career. And I'm thrilled to be your host for today's panel. Before we get started, some housekeeping. The discussion is going to be in English, but for those of you who prefer to listen in French, you can click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen. Select French and make sure you click on Mute Original Audio. Also, you can send questions for your questions for our panelists through the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll be happy to answer them during the Q&A segment at the end of this webinar. We timed this webinar to mark tomorrow's International Women's Day and to celebrate women's social, economic, cultural, and political achievements, alongside a call to action for accelerating gender parity and embracing equity. As a trusted community-based lender for almost 100 years, Fairstone is committed to making a difference where we live and work, and in sectors of deep importance to our organization: financial literacy, empowering women, and supporting our communities. Being here today with our great panelists is an excellent representation of what we do and why we are doing it. Now, today we have a fantastic panel for you. We're going to discuss current state of financial literacy for women across Canada, and we're going to be diving into topics such as how women can overcome barriers to financial independence, what inclusive and accessible financial literacy education looks like, and increasing the financial literacy and how to increase the financial literacy and empowerment for women to benefit society as a whole. To set the stage, I'm going to welcome our panelists. So welcome Suzanne, Saijal, and Julie to the virtual stage. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to spend the next 90 minutes with you on how women and financial literacy can help embrace equity. So I'm going to start with a short introduction for each of our panelists. As an aside note, if you want to learn more about our speakers today, their full bios are on the events page on fairstone.ca. I'm going to start with Suzanne. So Suzanne Duncan is the Vice President for Philanthropy of Canadian Women's Foundation. Suzanne has helped social justice organizations reach their philanthropic potential for 20 years. Now at Canadian Women's Foundation, Suzanne is advancing gender justice and ensuring women, girls, and non-binary people don't get left behind as we recover from the pandemic. Welcome, Suzanne. Our next guest is Saijal Patel. Saijal is the founder and CEO of Sage Wealth Consulting, a financial consultancy and education platform with a mission to help women create financial independence and security through Saijal and its series of online programs. She's also the creator and host of Strictly Money, Canada's only national personal finance program, and a former business anchor and correspondent for Canada's BNN and CNBC Asia. Thanks for joining us, Saijal.
Glad to be here.
And finally, we have Julie Haché. Julie is an entrepreneur, a coach, an angel investor, and former CTO. Julie deeply values startups and entrepreneurship and the importance of long-term sustainable thinking and conscious learning to build lasting resilience for what lies ahead. She is also strongly community and social venture oriented and carries forward these values into her ventures, investments, and advisory roles. She is also a member of the National Board of Directors at JA Canada. Great to have you here, Julie. Okay, again, welcome everyone. And thank you for being here. We're really in for a great discussion on women, finances, and wellness. So let's get right into the discussion. I'm going to ask each of you to give a short overview of your organization and what you are doing from a financial literacy for women perspective. Saijal, why don't we start with you?
Sure. First of all, Amir, thank you so much to you and the Fairstone team for putting this discussion together. I know you've been working really hard, and this is our first collaboration, so thank you. And thank you to the 180 people who have joined in prioritizing their financial health, because it's a wonderful turnout. So to answer your question, I started Saijal in 2017. I was still living in Hong Kong. I had just left the financial industry. And for those of you who may not know, I've been in the financial industry for 20 some years in various roles as a former advisor and an investment strategist. And as Amir had mentioned, a business TV journalist for a big chunk of it. And one of the things that I knew very well over those 20 plus years is that everyone cares about money. You know, we all need it to survive and thrive, except that very, very few of us have been taught the skills to actually manage our money well. Very few, because it's not really taught in schools, and chances are it's not taught in your homes properly. And I wanted to change that dialogue. I wanted to change the narrative that we have towards money. And as I was doing research, I started recognizing the uphill challenges that women have in particular. So as a woman, as a single woman who's had to make, different financial decisions, I wanted to change that and support women. So my organization was born. And as Amir had mentioned, I have a series of online programs for women exclusively, where I teach them and they can take it on their own. But I also knew that I was one person, and I can't change the bigger system. So I actually work with organizations that I feel have skin in the game. So I work with a lot of financial institutions to service women better. I work with just ordinary corporations in running workshops. And because I wanted to make the conversation mainstream, I decided that I was going to launch a TV show about 1.5 years ago. So that's where Strictly Money comes in.
That's awesome. That's great. Julie, did you want to give an overview? You're on mute. There you go.
First off, thank you so much for inviting me and Jay to this panel. We're so proud that we're now having a 5-year partnership with Fairstone, working together to support financial literacy across Canada. And we're once again really excited to be a part of this event. Thank you so much for putting this together. It's such a great event, and thanks to all that are attending as well. A little bit about JA. So our programs inspire students to understand their potential, set life goals, and succeed at school and in business. We accomplish this by partnering with teachers, dedicated volunteers, who bring the real world into the classroom. Our programs are based on 3 pillars. Those are financial literacy, work readiness, and entrepreneurship. Through JA's Canada-wide initiatives last year, we reached more than 270,000 students. This is from grades 3 to 12, and this included 136,000 girls. Our financial literacy program has reached over 140,000 students, 50% of which are girls. JA is also working to remove barriers to financial literacy education, especially in those unserved and underserved areas of the country. This is a big priority for us right now. That's including rural and inner city communities by creating an accessible and engaging online platform at jacampus.org. This is where we house all of JA's online platforms, where students, teachers, volunteers, and parents can access self-directed programs as well as teacher and volunteer-led materials. Thanks again.
That's great. Welcome. And Suzanne?
Hi, I am just delighted to be here today on the eve of International Women's Day to talk a little bit about women in financial literacy. And I'm here from the Canadian Women's Foundation, which has been around for 35 years and exists to move women, girls, and gender diverse people out of poverty, out of violence, and into confidence and leadership. Today, we're really going to be speaking about from that perspective of how we help to move women out of poverty through economic development. And economic development has been generously supported by Fairstone since 2021. The programs that Fairstone funds help increase financial stability and empower women by offering training in 3 areas: skilled trades and technology, entrepreneurship, and building job experience and social purpose enterprises. In addition to people and participants getting this financial literacy training, they are also paired with mentors. They are really given the opportunities to strengthen their career networks. So this is quite a wraparound program that's funded that helps women maximize their chances for success, and has a lot of those really important supports built in, like childcare services, subsidies, loans for course materials, referrals for other services. It's a really great way to get women on the path to economic independence. And the foundation also advocates at a national level for systems and policy changes on issues that impact women's financial independence. So that includes really getting down to brass tacks on the gender pay gap, which is still so persistent. Also talks about talking about policies that help workplace discrimination and harassment, and really getting a bit of a rethink to Canada's care economy, where so many women work, often at wages that are quite insufficient to the work that they do. So we are thrilled today to announce as well that Fairstone has made a recent commitment to continue to support that economic development work for another 4 years. And this kind of long-term investment provides the stability the foundation needs to strengthen these programs and allow them to plan for the future. So thank you so much, and thanks for letting us be part of the panel today.
That's great, and we're happy to support. Thank you so much for the overviews. I know our audience appreciates learning more about you and what your teams are doing. Financial literacy is a broad topic, but what does it really mean? From my point of view, financial literacy means having the skills and knowledge to make informed decisions about managing your money. And why is that important? Well, for many reasons, but if you consider a couple of statistics here, 4 in 10 Canadians report that money is a daily concern. A third of low-income Canadians report worrying about money almost constantly. Less than half of Canadians, 46%, have a personal budget. And nearly 6 out of 10 Canadian adults do not know how much money they need to save for retirement. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask the panel, what would you say is the current state of financial literacy for women across Canada? And perhaps I can start with you, Saijal.
Sure. So financial literacy is, it's interesting because I don't think there's a clear definition. I think every organization defines it differently. And I've looked at various ones, but the OECD, actually, one of its subgroups came up with a test for financial literacy, and they use it across various countries. So there's this apples to apples comparison, and what they did is they ask 7 questions, and it is to test the financial concepts, to see if people understand them. And it's things like, do you understand the relationship between risk and reward? Do you understand the impact of inflation, the benefits of diversification, compound interest, and what that entails? So they'll ask a series of these questions. And what they found was that in Canada, only 60% of Canadians met that minimum threshold, which is to get 5 answers right out of the 7. But if you look at the gender differences, 72% of men could answer or meet that threshold, and only 50% of women could. And when I talk about this in events, I think a lot of women are surprised because they think, well, I live in a first world country, we're educated. How could this be? And they're surprised when I talk about other countries like China actually having a higher financial literacy rate and that gap actually being smaller. But the point that I would make too, and I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes, is that financial literacy alone doesn't determine success. And I went to an event, I go to these conferences around financial literacy, and the term that more and more financial literacy experts are using is what's called financial capability. Because what they say is knowledge isn't enough. If I asked anyone here that's joining today, well, how do you lose 10 pounds? You'd all be able to tell me that's knowledge. How many of you would be successful? That's an entirely different thing. And so financial capability actually talks about not just knowledge, which is a very important piece, but it looks at confidence, your behavior and attitude towards money. Because if you don't have that, you're probably not even going to start learning. And then what do you do with the knowledge, right? You have to apply it to your own personal situation. And most importantly, you have to act on that knowledge. So all of those pieces are actually important, because if you know what you're doing, but you don't do anything, chances are you're not going to be successful. If you act and you don't know what you're doing, chances are you're going to be unsuccessful, right? So that's actually the important piece.
Very, very insightful. Suzanne, did you want to add?
Sure. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think it's important to think about the history of women and finance and women in the workplace. One fact that always sticks out for me in Canada, women were only legally allowed to have their own bank accounts starting in 1967. We were not allowed to have jobs in most fields. We certainly weren't allowed to have jobs if we were married. And it took until the 60s, 70s, 80s for those things to start to shift, but it's still deeply unequal across different sectors, particularly in jobs that pay more, like leadership jobs, and other jobs that are traditionally male dominated. So we're talking about changes that have radically happened for women in the last 60 to 70 years. And you can see how these have repercussions today. So we know that financial literacy remains gendered, and research really shows that women face a lot more barriers to earning, saving, and financial decision-making than men do. Research also shows that when people are in heterosexual couples, the partner with higher earnings, which does tend to be the man, tends to be leading the long-term financial planning and decision-making. And that really shows over and over again across Canada. Now, I know a lot of us, are tired of talking about the pandemic, but the pandemic also underlined that when we're in crisis situations, women's financial independence is sacrificed for family care. So responsibilities like childcare, elder care means that women leave the workplace or take on much less work. So part-time work, temporary work, so that they can do that that they can do those family care responsibility. And that puts them in even more vulnerable financial situations. So all of this is super urgent for us to talk about. And this is such a timely panel. And it's really urgent because I think we also know that women tend to live longer than men. And that means that they're highly likely to find themselves as sole financial decision makers in their senior years. But because of that pay gap, because of that gap around financial literacy, they often also enter their senior years having had less opportunity to accumulate independent retirement savings. So you just see this spiral keep happening, this cycle keep happening that we need to break through. And we really need to make sure that everyone's on that level playing field so that we can really ensure the productivity of all people in Canada.
You raised some really, really good points. Julie, do you want to add some comments there?
Sure, I'll expand a little bit on the youth side of things. So kind of adding to this, Saijal mentioned some OECD research. So there's also been studies among children as well. That have shown, unfortunately, that girls are generally less confident when it comes to managing money than their male counterparts. So we're seeing this even in youth. Only 12% felt confident making financial decisions. And in that same study, it showed that 90% of girls want to learn how to better manage their money. And so those are real values that we can pay attention to as well from a youth perspective. I also kind of wanted to add from a anecdotal perspective, just through having worked regularly with early stage women entrepreneurs. through my coaching practice, and even just through friends and acquaintances, I would say the lack of confidence is really palpable. So we're seeing, like, most women who I've discussed finances with, this is something that they'll bring up in a lot of situations, just social situations, and check in with people. I've noticed that a lot of them have expressed sort of some uncertainty about their knowledge, their abilities, and kind of some genuine doubt around whether they're planning properly for their future. Like, and there's kind of this sense of imposter syndrome of, like, we don't really know how to get into this necessarily, and I don't know what I don't know. So money, financial planning, and literacy are, like, I find they're so rarely discussed amongst group of women's. There's really a sense of inaccessibility there.
Thank you for that. As I listen to you speak, there's a lot of insight there, but it's a little bit alarming as well. As a responsible lender, Fairstone tries to develop and implement different initiatives to empower women within our employee base, as well as in our customer base and communities. Recently, we launched our Women's Network. It's an initiative delivered by the Women's Committee to work on our organization's commitment to parity and build around our pillar of empowering women. Our Women's Network is a space to connect. It's a place for employees, both women and allies, to foster power of women through learning, sharing, and peer support. This is all with a very clear goal to ready more women for leadership positions at Fairstone. So this is just an example of what we're doing to try and empower women around leadership and financial literacy. I'm curious to hear what you think are the current barriers to financial independence for women and how we can overcome these. And I thought, Suzanne, maybe you can start us off on that.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And I just want to applaud the efforts that you're taking as an organization with events like this, and also with those initiatives you just described to really help change the pipeline and change the way that women can progress in your organization. I really applaud those things. Now, as an organization and as representing an organization that works with people who are experiencing a lot of barriers, we're really aware of some of those systemic issues that are holding people back. And the first thing that I want to say is that poverty in Canada is gendered. Women are absolutely more likely to be living on a low income, and there's lots of reasons for that. Some of those are a lack of access to affordable quality childcare. There's also a real gap in affordable housing. There's a single parent families who are trying to make ends meet on one income. There's also some discrimination in hiring and career advancement. And we've got that persistent gender pay gap where we're looking at about 89 cents on the dollar across between men and women. But that number is even deeper when we think about folks who are racialized, people who are experiencing racism, colonialism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia. Those gaps get even bigger. So we're really wanting to identify the fact that so many women are being held back because of those systemic and intersecting forms of discrimination. And it gets even more important when we think about the fact that poverty heightens the risk of economic dependence. So if you don't have enough money to pay your rent, you might be really vulnerable to victimization. You might be really vulnerable to having to stay in relationships that are not safe for you, working in conditions that might not be safe for you. And that's why we know that poverty and gender-based violence are intertwined. For many women in abusive situations, financial dependence and financial abuse are key barriers to leaving, particularly if there's women involved. Children involved. And that's like a really big thing for us to think about when we think about financial literacy, because financial literacy and financial independence and feeling in control of your own resources can really help people make safer decisions for themselves and take actions that are going to be safer for themselves and their families. And that's why at the Canadian Women's Foundation, we think a lot about economic development and a lot about ending violence at the same time, because they're so intertwined. I also want to just say, again, unfortunately, women tend to be concentrated in minimum wage, part-time, and precarious jobs, which means there's a lot less potential for them to save money and a lot less ability for them to implement long-term financial literacy skills. And that got a little bit worse, and sometimes a lot worse in the pandemic, because the pandemic decreased a lot of women's financial independence. And we know that women were most affected by layoffs, particularly in hospitality, particularly in entertainment, and that many had to leave the workforce or scale back their paid work so that they could do those caregiving responsibilities that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, no, definitely a lot of barriers there, but it sounds like your organization is really doing some good work. So that's great. Julie, your thoughts on barriers and how we can overcome them?
Yeah. So I think like the first thing is oftentimes when I explain JA to most people, so, just as being on the board and loving to talk about my work, their initial response is, why weren't we taught this really important life skill in school? I think, at least from my experience and what I've observed and learned, financial knowledge has long been passed down through generations, typically amongst men, and money talk was always kept as a private matter, not to be discussed among peers, often disguised as it's impolite to talk about money. This has had a really exclusive effect, especially a way to gatekeep financial independence. For those of us, women especially, who weren't born into this privilege and access, we're tasked to break out of our own generational and systemic challenges, all on our own, to access what we believe should be ready available to all. This is really what JA's mandate is to address, by normalizing and making accessible financial literacy and the skills from an early age to all children and youth. It allows those without that privilege, that family privilege, that socioeconomic privilege, to have an opportunity to break through those barriers. JA works upstream to ensure that girls have equal access to core financial education skills. As for women who are too late for JA, I really think it's up to those of us who can, and for structures and powers to help elevate, empower, and support women in need. By having the conversations, by involving employers, and by creating programs that are easily accessible and targeted to women.
That's great. Thank you for that. Saijal, any thoughts on barriers and how we overcome them?
Well, I think Suzanne and Julie did a great job in nailing down, the barriers. There's systemic barriers, as Suzanne mentioned, and there's even, the cultural barriers that Julie had mentioned. When I speak about this, I also talk about, the price that we pay for that. And, Suzanne did a great job in explaining it. How I typically talk about it is, that 20% wealth or wage gap, 17 to 20%, whatever it is, how quickly that can translate into a 40 to 50% wealth gap. Because if women are not making as much money and they're taking the career breaks, whether it's to take care of their children or elderly parents, I'm in the situation where, thank goodness, I have my own business because I take care of my father who has dementia. So I knew that I needed that flexibility. But when you do that, it means that you're saving less, obviously, but you're also contributing less to some sort of a pension plan, whether that's our CPP or government pension plan, or whether it's a corporate pension plan. And you have to remember that those pension plans are invested. So when we're not doing that, there's that wealth gap that ends up being 40 to 50% in retirement. And so many women are not aware of this. Just imagine having 40 to 50% less in retirement compared to a man. So when I tell them, that women are 80% more likely than a man to live in poverty, they're shocked, right? But what I also tell women is that, look, there's a lot that we're not fixing overnight. We can't fix the systemic barriers. It's not going to happen right away. However, what is in our control is that financial capability. That's completely up to us. We decide what we're going to learn, right? We can take some time in learning the knowledge and the skills and learning, to save better or invest or protect our wealth. That's completely up to us. And when we do that, when we actually learn those skills and learn how money works, then we're in a much better position to influence those policies. Because whether we like it or not, we live in a capitalistic world. That's just reality. And money talks, and money is power. So, part of my agenda is I want women to have more money so they can influence those policies that is going to better our lives. But sorry, Amir, the point I would make too is I think a lot of women, there's this narrative out there that women are better at managing money. They are, but the focus tends to only be on saving and budgeting. Mm-hmm. And if you look at all the narratives out there, I just want everyone to just look at the magazines and what the media sends us in terms of messages. Everything is related to what we buy and how we buy it. And our self-esteem is tied to it. And yet I never see men having those conversations. They tend to focus on the revenue side, right? Oh, build wealth and do this. And I'm trying to get women to change that narrative and switch their lens. It's not just about budgeting and cutting. You can't cut your way to wealth. It doesn't happen in today's world, right? Expenses are growing much faster than wages, which is why I try to get women to focus on that revenue side. Raise your hand for that job, invest in yourself, and just invest, have a diversified income stream, and you will be so much better off for it.
Wow, great insight. Yeah, I think it's really the responsibility of all, right? It's businesses, it's government, it's individual to work to ensure that we remove these barriers. We talked about financial education as part of what we can do to help remove women's barriers to financial independence. Bringing it back to Fairstone, we're very much aligned with that. As a community-based lender, financial literacy is part of our corporate responsibility, our social responsibility pillar, and we're very strong advocates around that topic. As Julie is well aware, we are an annual partner with JA Canada. Each year in November, we have comprehensive internal and external financial literacy campaigns. Our website as well, fairstone.ca, is a great resource for all sorts of financial education content to help our customers and communities gain more knowledge about how to navigate their finances. That brings me to my next question. And what do you think inclusive and accessible financial literacy and education looks like? And I thought I'd go right back to you, Saijal. What do you think?
Oh, I think we have to recognize that finance is personal, right? I use this analogy. It's like having, a thumbprint. All of us are unique, meaning that all of us have unique starting points, a unique amount of resources, a unique view and values towards money, and even unique goals. We all have different financial goals and how we want to achieve them. And it's recognizing that, when I talk about financial wellness, and I don't know how many people understand sort of the term financial wellness, because it's not a common term, right? We talk about emotional wellness and physical wellness, but financial wellness is a state of being, reflecting our ability to sort of meet current and ongoing obligations. You want to feel secure about your financial future, and you want to be able to make choices that allow you to enjoy life. And in all of those pieces, it's personal. We all have different obligations, again, different resources. Our definition of how we want to enjoy life and what that means to us is different. So to me, being inclusive is really meeting the person where they are and helping them go from where they are to where they want to be. And that's going to look unique to everyone. And the other part around accessibility, I think, is we have to make it much easier to understand. The financial industry just has not done a very good job on this. It's riddled with jargon and complications. We don't often make it relatable. And so people are turned off by that. There's this sense of it's really overwhelming to learn. When I teach this, I've been doing it for 5 years. It's not, it doesn't have to be at all. It's just, I don't know if it's been approached the right way. Accessibility also means, to me, making it just in time, meaning that when someone wants to learn something, they have the opportunity to go somewhere to ask questions when they get stuck. I think that's really important. And I talk about sludges and nudges, right? We have to remove the sludge that makes people give up because they're already feeling, overwhelmed, especially when this is not their world. So, removing those sludges and increasing the nudges, giving them the support when they need it.
I'm going to use that terminology in the future.
Sludge and nudge, yeah.
Julie, what are your thoughts?
I think I mirror Saijal's definition of, inclusive and accessible. And in terms of, financial education, this means it is accessible to everyone. And in a way that is best for the receiver to receive the knowledge in the best way possible. And so we're going to them and reaching them where they are. So from a JA perspective, we're looking at it from, just our large community that we've got to serve. We're currently completing a community mapping initiative. And so we're learning at this point where people are, what their needs are. And we're doing this from a very data-driven approach. This will inform JA's digital marketing strategy, our allocation of program funds, and we're looking to prioritize communities across all of our charters. We've got several charters across the country. Using all of this data and looking at like 3 main streams of inquiry here. So we're looking to focus on areas of underserved and high potential for impact. So these are areas that we might be in already, but we see a really high potential of having a much larger impact in these communities. Areas with socioeconomic and demographic characteristics of special interest. So there are certain areas that are, are more challenged in this way than others. And areas of low outreach by JA program delivery. So there are places, including, the north of Canada and smaller remote communities where we just aren't able to, or we haven't yet kind of realized our full potential of accessing folks there. We're pretty confident, we're feeling pretty confident this approach will help reach us more, help us reach more youth who haven't received the programming from us previously. And, it's really, that's towards our commitment of creating a more equitable country. I would say even, I kind of wanted to add to this in a way that from a women's perspective, there's such an opportunity here for employers to empower their people by supporting them in their financial literacy needs as well. And so, it's at work, it's available. We're all here. We're already talking about money at work. It's already part of what we're doing. In my experience, really early on in my career, I joined this little startup called Shopify. And as we started to grow, I think we were only about 20, 30 people at this point. So very, very early stage. Toby Luca, our CEO, was pretty confident that, this might turn into something much, much larger, which it has. But he would put together lunch and learns for us and actually kind of sit us down and realize hey, you folks might be making some money that, that will become wealth. And so let's talk about it. Let's learn about it. Let's figure out how to make informed decisions about this. So we learned about such great money management habits. We would be much better prepared in investing, understanding how investment works. And so I feel so fortunate for having had access to that at that point. As Shopify grew, it continued this support. So the company did go public and continued the support by offering access to financial planners and other kind of employee-driven savings plans, et cetera, ways for people to make decisions about their money. And honestly, I hadn't had access to anything like this before. So this was really a way that leveled me up. And, this really timely advice, like I might have made incredibly different financial decisions. They could have impacted me in a very different way. But instead of that, I feel really confident and capable of supporting others. I think employers can really have a huge impact on the financial freedom of their people. And it also supports kind of breaking that systemic barrier. And that can continue to be done at any age.
That's a great story. And as you know, Fairstone's a big supporter of JA Canada as well. So that's fantastic. Suzanne, any final comments on this topic?
Yeah, I think that the comment that both Julie and Saijal talked about was meeting people where they're at. And that's a really important piece of this. And I think when you're thinking about meeting diverse people where they're at, you need to also be thinking about cultural barriers, language barriers, historical legacies like racism or colonization. Those are things to kind of think about. And I want to just introduce the word shame into this conversation. So no matter how we've outlined all the barriers and all the reasons why women are often paid less or not able to accumulate wealth at the same rate, there's still so much shame bound up in living on a low income. There's so much shame bound up in the idea that you may not be succeeding as fast as other people around you. And inclusive financial literacy and inclusive financial education shouldn't make assumptions that people's financial literacy is linked to their economic status. People who live on low incomes often have really strong financial management skills and are extremely resourceful about maximizing every dollar spent. But they're also going to be penalized because they're at that lower income, and they're not going to be able to invest, take advantage of cost-saving strategies like buying in bulk. They may have to resort to ways to pay for things that are more costly in the long run. And one of the things that we've really heard loud and clear from all of the grantees that we fund across the country, and I'll also say from my own personal experience growing up in a pretty low income family, is that when we are talking about how to get out of poverty, we're often thinking about long-term savings or retirement plans that might just be unattainable for people at different stages in the journey. So, when my mother was working very low income jobs, it was about the day-to-day, and it was great at managing that money at that moment. But, she would feel so much shame about not being able to save. And we need to let go of that shame. We've talked about the context, the barriers, how recent it is that women have been involved in financial conversations. We need to really look at financial literacy training that recognizes where people are at that moment and helps draw on strengths rather than shame. Because the idea that if you could just manage your money better, you'd be better off, that's often not what the barrier in front of you is saying. So we need to acknowledge those systemic barriers. We need to acknowledge the realities that women face across their lifespan. And we also need to acknowledge that women and gender diverse people may need different advice that's going to work specifically for them. There's so much gender neutral financial planning, but that's almost assuming that everyone's going to work continuously for decades. They may not be taking time out for caregiving. They may not have the capacity to save for retirement while they're out taking care of caregiving. Women's careers are much more likely than men's to be interrupted. And so we need to bring that into account as well, really having a much more strength-based way of talking about people's ability to save, people's ability to invest, and the kind of skills that they're bringing to the table.
Suzanne, can I just say my heart's singing right now? You said, you just nailed it. And what somebody said to me, and it really it was like a light bulb. Your self-worth is not determined by your net worth. And I hope everyone on this gets that.
That's a great point.
Suzanne,
Suzanne, you raised some really good points there. Eye-opening, to be honest. That's great. Thank you for that. As I mentioned in the intro, that tomorrow is International Women's Day. This year, their global theme is embracing equity. Equity recognizes that each person has a different set of circumstances and allocates resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. The Embrace Equity campaign, though, seeks to get the world talking about why equal opportunities are no longer enough, and in fact can be exclusionary rather than inclusive. And so with that, I'd ask, if I were to, what's being financially savvy how can that help embrace equity? And what would your thoughts be on that? And Saijal, maybe if you can kick off the dialogue there.
Sure. I think, first of all, I think it's actually admitting that we do not live in an equitable world. We don't. Men still control 70% of the wealth, and women control 30%. And, it goes back to, some of the things that I was saying, that when men control the wealth, and wealth dictates power and influences policies, it's not necessarily going to be in the lens of women, and I'm not saying men are bad. It's just their lens is, and the way they view world is the way they view the world is different than women do. So I think we have to recognize that. Now, I'm a firm believer that even in a capitalistic world, we can use money for good. Call me optimistic or Pollyanna, but I do believe that. And I think women, which is why I think women need more money, because it's proven that they are more philanthropic, and they think about their community much more, right? And they use their dollars for that. Now, the good news is that women are coming into wealth. We're adding something like $5 trillion every year. And it is because more women are participating in the labor workforce, right? More women are entrepreneurs. They're inheriting money. They're raising their hands for leadership positions. I'd like to see more of that, but we are progressing, which is a good thing. And at some point in our lives, ladies, we are going to be the sole financial decision maker. 90% of us will, because more and more women are single. Chances are we're going to, and Suzanne had talked about this, we're probably going to outlive our partners, right? Which means that there is this huge untapped opportunity to use that wealth to change those policies. It's not enough just to collect money. It's a matter of what we do with it. And that's why I focus so much on the financial literacy part, because we can't take care of other people if we're not taking care of ourselves first. So it starts with us. It starts with understanding, how money works. And then I do believe that we will start influencing policies to make it more equitable.
Great points. Julie, what do you think? Financial savvy and embracing equity.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of Seijal's points. If we go back to the meaning, as you said, equity meaning that we acknowledge that each woman has different circumstances, typically significantly challenging ones, and that our work is really to reach women where they are currently in order to elevate them. When we allow for all to have access to financial knowledge, especially at these early stages of life, I think we give people new possibilities of life. We allow the opportunity to break out of those generational patterns, that systemic oppression. And this is how we kind of level that financial playing field, which is bringing us to equality, essentially. That has so many benefits, as Saijal has mentioned, for individuals, families, and communities. From the systemic point of view, I think it's important to focus on this, to build an understanding of where women really are and creating those specific resources tailored to them. As for being kind of financially savvy, helping embrace equity, I think empowered people empower people. The more women we help elevate out of challenging situations and circumstances, the more others will see this as possible for them. At JA, as mentioned previously, we're starting down this road for unserved and underserved communities. But I really like this JA Costa Rica example. So Costa Rica has different challenges as Canada has in terms of accessibility. And so internet is not available for everyone as it is here. So instead of going the digital, how we're building a digital platform, They approached it by doing a radio program, which I thought was just so insightful and so great to be able to actually reach their population. So they have a scheduled time where every week there's a JA program, and then they get together in class and discuss what they learned on the radio program. So there's so many ways of us, gaining the knowledge and understanding of meeting people where they are, and then creating those resources. And I've said it so many times, but I think that's really the solution here, of meeting people where they are and bringing them up.
Very well said. Suzanne, a lot of good things came out. And anything else to add about financial savvy, embracing equity?
Well, I think I'm just so inspired right now. The conversations that Julie and Saijal have brought up around power, around empowerment, around money, all of those are really important. And the more financially savvy we are, the more we know about our resources, the more power we have, and the more power we can extend to other people. And I think, what always stands out in my mind is it took 35 years for Canada outside of Quebec, 35 years for us to really move forward on a childcare strategy. That is an unacceptably long period of time, when we know that one of the biggest things that holds women back is not having safe and affordable childcare. When we have more money, when we have more financial savvy, when we have more power, when we have more people empowered, we can push for faster change. And I think that's what we need today, to not be satisfied waiting 35 years for a high stakes support. We can come together, use our collective voices, use our collective strengths, use our collective know-how to lift everyone up and get the right policies and barriers removed.
I absolutely love the passion of this panel. It's fantastic. As I think about it, when I was starting my career, I was an accountant, and I worked in the financial services industry. And so I obviously appreciate the importance of financial literacy. I'm also the father of 3 boys, and I feel it's important to give my children at least a basic working knowledge of personal finances, so they are equipped for the future. I've taught them the value of money, the importance of saving for the future, using credit wisely, balancing their spending with their income, and making smart financial decisions. So with that, I'm curious to know if you agree, and why it's important to start financial education at a young age. Julie, do you want to kick us off with this one?
I will happily start on this one. Amir, I agree that starting to teach all these skills at a young age is setting your children and all other children up for success. Planting these seeds very early on helps children kind of view the world through that financial lens. Through our programs, children learn about money management, career choices, starting their own businesses, investing, and living debt-free from as early as grade 3. I want to highlight a really very high impact program that's delivered by JA to high school aged youths, called the JA Company Program. Within the company program, young folks found a company together and learned the whole ins and outs of running a business. They receive support from our corporate and community partners for mentorship as well. So it's so great. People usually meet in different offices of different corporations, and they have their mentors come in and meet with them and really support them through this whole process. It's now been shown through a European research project and policy experiment that measured the impact of the J Company program on these students from ages 15 to 19. And in this first year of study, it indicated that the company program had given many young people the confidence that they have the necessary knowledge, skills required to start their business. It also increased the proportion of young men and women that prefer to be self-employed and that intend to be entrepreneurs. Another article found that this program had a positive impact on business skills, career preferences, and the likelihood of founding one's own company. The results were moderated by gender. And we saw that the effect of company program on the skills and knowledge of how to start a business and preference for self-employment was actually significantly stronger among young women than men. So this is a really high impact thing of helping young women make decisions for their future, have that entrepreneurial mindset, and really kind of create financial freedom for themselves. So Jay is building this skill set and changing these mindset. They're enabling girls to recognize early on that they can do what boys can do as well. And so that's really kind of, we're trying to flip that script a little bit. Girls compete as unique teams or alongside their male team members each year at the Jay Signature Entrepreneurship Program. There's part of this is also this Company of the Year competition, and time again, they keep excelling in their vision, organization, creativity, and commitment. They're fierce, they're competing to win, and they usually do. So through JA, young women are charting their own futures in business, in government, in education, in medicine, in technology, in science, in whatever they choose. I've seen this with my own eyes. So I've had the chance to judge the Company of the Year competitions for a few years now. And the young women and men are just incredibly well equipped, to a point that I'm almost envious that at that age, that's the skill set that they have. It's just such an incredible thing. So it really kind of truly sets them up for success in both their career and personal futures.
That's
So
great.
yeah, to cap it off, I really think, you know, starting things off really young just has such an impact on what youth see as available to them.
Absolutely. Suzanne, what do you think about financial education at a young age?
Yeah, I think I could have used it. So I want to talk just personal first, and then a little bit about the foundation. But as I mentioned before, I certainly grew up with not a lot of means in the house. And in fact, a real sense that we shouldn't talk about money. If I ever said anything about money, my parents would be so angry, so upset. I'm so ashamed. So money was really bound up in a bit of trauma for me. I assumed that people got money magically. My parents sometimes worked, sometimes didn't, had lots of different things going on that were quite challenging. So I assumed somebody just had like a magical money tree and money would just fall on them. And that somehow that made them a good person, and something was wrong with my family for not having money. So it took a long time. And in fact, I ended up in a job where I talk about money all day, every day. I ask people to give money away for free to make the world better. And that is a really interesting job. It's a really profound job. And it's one where we talk about money a lot. And I had to do a lot of work with financial planners, with literacy coaches, with therapists, all of those people to help me feel confident enough to talk to people about money, because it was such a difficult spot for me. And so when I came to the Canadian Women's Foundation, one of the things I was most inspired by was the way that we are helping create financial education at a young age. And we're empowering girls, not just around money, but also around letting go of shame, letting go of that, building up their confidence. And we fund programs throughout Canada that encourage girls to recognize their potential and to defy stereotypes. And these stereotypes could be about jobs, they could be about goals, they're about what girls are supposed to do or not supposed to do. And all of these programs bring in a piece of science or tech. They bring in supportive environments. They help girls gain a better understanding of what jobs are out there, how jobs work, what fields would they be interested in without those limits of what they should and shouldn't do. And they also, as I said before, connect people with mentors and role models. These are all things that I could have really used as a young person that would have set me up in a much different way. And I'm so excited to hear about the programs Julie is talking about and to read about the programs we fund across the country, because it's getting at the how do we talk about money in a non-judgmental way? How do we feel comfortable speaking openly about our challenges? It's so funny how much we might know about our friends, every personal detail of our friends, but I bet you don't know your friend's salary. You know, there's things that are still so cloaked in secrecy and stigma, questions you're not supposed to ask. All of these things are really rooted deeply in Western European culture. And it's some of that stuff we need to shake out, because it's not an inevitability. We can talk about money openly. We can share with each other how we've gotten to where we are, and we can help lift up others to make sure that they're able to have the resources they need to approach money management in a way that doesn't trigger shame and stigma and trauma.
Very well said. Very well said. Saijal, your thoughts on financial education at a young age?
Oh, I have so much to say. So little time. Well, first of all, Amir, good for you for teaching your sons about money, because it is so important. And the program, Suzanne, that you guys are doing with JA, it's going to make such a difference. What I would say is, listening to you, Suzanne, my childhood was the opposite. So my parents talked about money all the time. By the time I was 7, I knew what they made. They showed me their paycheck. I understood there was a concept called taxes. The government takes money. They'd have their advisor and agents come over for dinner, and I knew they were doing something. I was always aware. And they talked about money. They talked about their values around money. They talked about why they were making certain decisions and not other decisions. But I think what was interesting is they were immigrants to this country. So for my mom, English was not her first language. So she actually relied on my brother and I to, she'd say, what does this bank statement mean? How do we complete income taxes? And I tell this story and it shocks everyone. When my brother was in grade 7, he used to do my parents' income taxes by hand, grade 7, right? So why do I say this? Well, because I thought this was normal. I thought, when I went into the financial industry, I said, what do you mean your parents don't talk about money? Because I couldn't believe that, and again, to Suzanne's point, I wanted to change that and erase the shame and stigma, because it is important. We develop our money personality by the time we're 7, and it influences so much of whether we're going to be successful or not. And I don't blame parents, because every time I talk to parents say, well, I would love to teach my children, but I don't know what to teach them. I don't have the skills myself, right? So what I tell parents is learn together. It's really important. And I also deal with parents who say, well, the schools will take care of it, because now that we're starting to see a bit of financial literacy in schools, the parents tend to think, well, hands off, they'll deal with it. Well, it doesn't work that way, that easily. I mean, it's great that there's financial literacy coming into schools, but there has been research done in the US that shows that the impact is a bit better, but it's not life-changing. And you know why? It's because so much of our financial success is driven by values. So if you're teaching certain concepts in schools, and then they're going home and the parents are doing the complete opposite, spending their money, talking about shame, how successful do you think those children are going to be? It's like teaching healthy eating habits, and then the parents only serve pizza. You can't make an impact. And so that's why I encourage anyone here who has children, sit down and start talking about it. We need to start erasing the shame, and it's perfectly okay to say, I don't know the answer, learn together, because I think that's really important. But every time I talk to children, they say they look at their parents as role models, and they were dying to learn this stuff from their parents. And I think it's really important that we do that and have those conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've all had different experiences growing up, but I think we all agree about the importance of starting financial education at a young age. I mentioned earlier that I owe many of my professional successes to the incredible women with whom I've worked with and learned from throughout my career. Most of my mentors were successful women in the latter parts of their careers, and they took a keen interest in developing a younger workforce. They took great pride in taking risks on developing talent and watching them bloom. And I wanted to ask you guys, how does increased financial literacy and empowerment for women benefit everyone? And Suzanne, I thought I'd start with you on that question.
Sure, I'm going to keep this pretty short and sweet, because financially empowered women become role models. We've talked a little bit about that. They help pave the way to a brighter financial future for future generations. Women's full economic participation boosts the economy, and we need that if we're going to have a strong economy in this country. Also, when women and gender diverse people are financially independent and literate, they and their children are safer. That's a really important thing. And I want us to think about not just how we can create stability for ourselves, but how we can really pay that forward in the way that you were talking about, Amir, with these leaders that you have met. We have one of our founding mothers has a fabulous quote that we think about every day, which is, until all of us have made it, none of us have made it. And keeping that really centered in your values is really important to help build that next generation.
Very well said. Saijal, what do you think? Empowering women and benefiting everyone.
Well, women make up half of society. So, if they're left behind, it has, as Suzanne said, it has a knock-on effect on our entire economic prosperity. I on my show last week, I interviewed, her name is Pamela Jeffrey, and she runs the Prosperity Project. They came out with their 3rd annual report, and we were talking about this. And what they have found is that during the pandemic, as Suzanne had mentioned, a lot of women left the workforce because they couldn't balance. It wasn't even realistic for them to balance work and taking care of family. And while a lot of women have come back to the workforce, many have chosen to give up the leadership roles. So it just goes to show that there's a lot more work to be done. We've kind of gone backwards in that progress and not forwards. But the point that we were making is the contribution. Like this matters to everyone, because if women are working and they're in higher paying jobs, it means they're paying their taxes. It means those taxes are funding social programs that we need, right? And so what's at stake is our economic prosperity. And we need to discuss that, a lot more. When I teach advisors, like I'll go in and run workshops on why they need to start paying attention to women. And one of the slides that I bring up is a pink ribbon. And they kind of all look at me and going, okay, what's this? And I say 2 words, breast cancer. Mm-hmm. And they still don't get it. And I said, breast cancer has raised more money than any other cancer in the world. In fact, they have so much money, they can't even spend it fast enough. And why I show that is I said, don't ever underestimate women who come together for a purpose, sisterhood, and using their money for good. That's like the perfect example, right? Wow. And it kind of just like, it's like a light bulb that goes on, right? And so when I say that, I go, that's the power that women have. And financial literacy and educating ourselves is just going to amplify that. I think there's a huge untapped opportunity that we need to lean into.
Julie, I don't know how you're going to follow up on that, but what do you think about empowerment for women benefiting everyone?
I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with everything that Suzanne and Saijal have shared here. Everyone needs to be sufficiently financially illiterate to effectively participate in all of our economic activities and to take appropriate financial decisions for themselves and their families and their communities as well. So the more we're capable as a whole, the more we can create and just for everyone. At JA, there's a program that we really value called the World of Choices program. And this is really focused on ages or grades 8 to 12. And that's really the focus behind this program. So we bring in inspirational speakers. It's a very interactive event that's done across schools. And the content is really around like empowering to succeed in designing career path for folks. So this is really meant to kind of elevate folks, recognizing and helping them understand how transferable their skills are. So communication, creativity, digital literacy, adaptability, and financial health, and how that can enable their career success. Helps them discover educational opportunities and training. Be equipped, help them kind of be equipped with that mindset and that skill set for the future of work and sort of understanding what the future of work looks like. understanding how to build a plan to acquire those skills and the education and the training that they need for future work, and exploring kind of potential pathways, including opportunities for skilled trade categories. So this is something that I don't think a lot of schools really focus on a lot. And so this is something, that is important as well. So whether that's construction, manufacturing, automotive, those are all really important skill sets, and very important skills to have for folks. And again, just kind of help elevate everyone to be a part, like a participant in our economy.
Awesome. We've been talking about it for a while now, and I think we all agree that financial knowledge is required for most things we do in our lives. Whether it's buying a car or a home, or getting married, raising a family, taking care of our parents, retiring, hopefully some leisure and travel in there, or just putting food on the table. I guess that brings me to the next question, which is, what do you think is the starting point for women who want to gain more financial independence and knowledge? And Julie, I thought you'd be the best to sort of kick us off with this one.
Sure. So for parents, I think it was Saijal that mentioned some stuff earlier. Like, I think it really does start at home on some level. It's really important that having those conversations, being open and transparent about financing and sharing your existing knowledge, especially with your girls. And then on top of that, complementing this and expanding that knowledge and learning together, as Saijal had mentioned, I think is a really valuable thing. And our digital campus at jacampus.org makes it really easy to do that for parents and children to be together. There's lots of self-directed contents and such a great resource for this. I think for women, there's a lot of power in us destigmatizing money conversations. We talked to conversations with your peers, talking to your friends, maybe even starting some sort of learning group or like a book club. Could be a really great to just start. It's like, no, this is just something that we all like. It's so amazing if we can all learn it and know it, and kind of support each other. Like, there's something about having a group, that just kind of creates that support and accountability as well. Of like, oh, hey, we're all going to work on this week. We're going to read this book. We're going to learn this resource. And also just the benefit of watching each other grow and seeing like, oh, wow, like I did this and this is what happened. There's just something so beneficial from that. And I think, that's something that can start really small, but that can just be so, so powerful. I'd be remiss to not mention social media. So there's a lot of resources out there, like Instagram and TikTok, can be really great starting points for a lot of folks on finding those accessible resources, whether those are book recommendations, whether it's about improving your mindset and investing. And so like there's so many accounts that I still follow that I just find are so great. I guess one of my favorites is Girls That Invest, who recently published a book as well. And so lots of really great starter perspectives, but also kind of like expand on, this is what's really happening in the financial world and having access to those things. I would also be remiss to mention, Saijal's resources, Suzanne's resources, they're both incredible. And it was so just great to learn about more of what you're doing today. And so highly recommend all of that. Also on the internet, just, again, like not everything is to be a trusted platform, like thing on these platforms. So just kind of use a critical eye when and kind of trust your gut on these things. It's important to kind of approach it that way. For women entrepreneurs, I would say there's groups in many communities that are available to you as well. A great starting point could be your local chamber of commerce. So in a lot of communities, entrepreneurship and getting to know local business owners as well. And again, like if there isn't something that exists already, maybe this is an opportunity to start a group talking about finances, understanding, running a business, etc. And so I run a co-working space, and it's like we provide resources to kind of allow people who work remotely, who run their own businesses, even like a collective insurance plan. So ways that we can kind of support people that are in these different situations. So do check all those things out. And then another one, again, it's talking to your employers, seeing what resources are already available within your company, within your organization, in terms of that financial planning, and then noticing if there's gaps. Like, is there a way for you to plant a seed for what might actually be missing there? And seeing if there's a way to kind of get people together to, again, talk about these really important things.
Awesome. That's quite the list you have there. Saijal, you have anything to add on to that list?
Oh, well, my advice is just to start. I think the biggest hurdle for women is time. Everyone's time starved, and there's this belief that you need a lot of time, or you need some PhD in math or something else to be able to get this, and you don't. I promise you, you don't. If you just schedule a half an hour in your calendar to just start learning, that's 25 hours in a year. And trust me, you can have your entire financial picture somewhat figured out in that time. So don't feel like you have to bite everything off, at once. It's baby steps. This is exactly the reason, and I'm going to do a shameless plug, but this is exactly why I started my course and I designed it the way it was, because I had talked to hundreds of women and I knew some of the challenges and I knew those sludges and the barriers that were there. So, I have a holistic program called Strictly Money, which will teach you everything about money, from mindset to saving to protecting to investing. It's all there. But I also have mini courses. So if you're not ready to do that, I have smaller courses if you're just focusing on saving or just focusing on investing and you just want to get started. But the great thing about it is there's a community. So you can ask me questions. There's a safe space to ask me questions. As Julie had mentioned, that's important, that community. So you feel like you're learning, because sometimes it's a lonely world to be on, this journey and not necessarily having other people to bounce ideas off. So I really would encourage you to look at those. Now, I do run a free money masterclass. And if you follow my Instagram at Saijal, you will see the link at the top. So take it. It's free. It's an hour and so of your time. And with that, you actually get an assessment list. So it helps you sort of gauge your gap, where where you're strong, but also where you might be vulnerable. So it's a little checklist that you can go through. So I would encourage you there. But if not, as Julie said, there's lots of resources out there. There's good books. I would rely more probably on government sites. I happen to be on Instagram. Use your critical eye, because I see things out there that are not necessarily good advice, but if it's going to motivate you and keep it top of mind, chances are you're going to do more about it. So there's nothing wrong with following them, but you just want to do your own homework and compare sites to make sure that you're getting the right information. That's what I would say.
Great advice. Suzanne, any last thoughts on starting point for women?
Yeah, I think there's been some great starting points talked about here. I always like to plug the local public library. That's another great place that's got great resources, great courses, super accessible. I encourage people to think about how they can decouple the feelings that they have around money from the actions they need to take around money. So whether that's through some self-reflection, some support around guilt, shame, those kinds of things that can often get in the way of having a clear-eyed financial plan. Think about how you can do that. And I just want to also say, everybody here has taken a big step forward. This has been a really powerful conversation, talking from the very practical to the very lofty and theoretical. I think that everybody being here today is taking a really important step at a really important time to understand what they could be doing differently and to bring some insight to that. So I just want to say congratulations to everybody that's here. There's been some really important conversations, and it'll really help kickstart the path that you want to take around your own financial literacy and financial empowerment.
Very well said. So many great insights on these important topics, to your point, Suzanne. So I think we've given our audience lots of food for thought on how to get started in their financial education journey. But enough about me asking questions. I'd like to give our audience an opportunity to interact with our panelists. I'm sure you have some questions. For those of you that do have questions, please send them to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And I will take a look to see if we've got any yet, and I'll give you guys an opportunity to submit some. We do have a couple here. So first one, and I think Suzanne, maybe you'll take this one. Are any of you involved in discussions or movements at the government level to raise EI for maternity leave or provide maternity leave for self-employed people? Lots of partial or full income during maternity leave can be very difficult for families and their financial stability. So I'll sort of leave it at that. Suzanne, did you want to take that first?
Absolutely. And the short answer is heck yes. This is a real barrier for a lot of folks, and something that the Canadian Women's Foundation has as part of its advocacy policies. There are some movements around being able as a self-employed person to pay into mat leave, which is something that might be an option for some people. But let me just say across the board, EI, social assistance, and disability pensions are all too low for people to survive on. And they're creating deeper cycles of intergenerational poverty. And it's something we need to look at from a maternity leave, from an EI perspective, from a disability perspective. We need to think about how all those pieces are fitting together, because people can, as Saijal said, you cannot cut your way out, like you can't cut your way out of poverty. When you're looking at income supports that might be $1,000 a month, full stop, to cover every single thing you need, less if we're talking about social assistance, we are not setting people up in a way that's going to allow them or their families to break out of poverty. So this is absolutely something we all need to continue to advocate for. And as Saijal said, the more that we're able to create our own empowerment, the more that we're able to use our own voices, these are the kinds of things we can collectively advocate for together, so that we don't continue to have the same conversations.
So I'm different role. I mean, I'm starting to talk to influencers around our tax structure. Frankly, we pay way too. We're just paying way too high of taxes. In fact, I'm interviewing someone tomorrow on my show about this and whether we need an overhaul, because we can talk about higher wages, but if we cut taxes, we're keeping the same amount. Like there's a net impact on that, right? And the other conversation I'm having sort of behind the scenes that I've started is around our CPP benefits. I think a lot of people are not aware that, if you are married and suppose your partner passes away, you don't get their CPP, especially if you're collecting your own. So that money's gone. And you might get a little bit of a top up, but if you're collecting your own, you actually don't get theirs. And I know a lot of women are not aware of this, but if women are living longer than men, which typically they do, and if they are facing a wealth gap and there's retirement security is at risk, we need to start looking at the CPP benefits and how they're being doled out.
That's a great point. I didn't even know that. Yeah. So I'm just conscious of time. And I think, Saijal, I think you're going to get a couple more followers on Instagram, which is fantastic. There are some people asking for your handle, and I think we've given them that. Okay, so why don't we, I think that's all the time we have for questions. But before we end this fantastic discussion, I'm going to ask our panelists one last question. And that is, what three things would you like our audience to take away from the discussion today? And maybe I'll actually start with you, Saijal.
Three things. Wow. I would say, well, I think I'll say one really important thing is again, just start. First of all, confidence. I hear a lot of women, well, I'm not confident. You don't become confident by being. I don't think so. I think you get confident by doing. So, when you start taking that step in learning, you will build confidence. because it's in front of you and you'll start taking actions, but you don't know if you're sort of living inside your head. So I would say take that step and trust yourself that you are resourceful enough to figure this out. We are living in we often see the financial world and sometimes even confidence through a man's lens. But you know, I did a podcast recently and somebody said, well, is it true that women are not very confident? I said, according to whose standards? Men's? Because if the confidence is, well, you know, you got to puff out your chest and you speak loud and you pretend you know when you don't know, that's, to me, that's not confidence. And, you know, women ask questions if they don't know, which is a wonderful thing. You don't want to go into this blindly. So just, you know, trust yourself and just know that you have a lot of strengths working for you and that this is not rocket science. I promise you that you can learn this and you have to learn it because your financial risks, your financial security could be at risk. But when you have money, you're just going to be able to influence so many people in your lives, you know, your kids, your sister, your friends, your community. I really do believe that.
Well said. Julie, I'm going to ask you one or two key takeaways.
Yeah, so I think for me the biggest takeaway from this conversation, so many great insights, and thanks so much for sharing your perspectives, is that there's still a lot of work to do. There's so much work, but there's also so much potential here. And so I actually kind of walking away from this conversation feel really kind of hopeful and optimistic that we're capable of tackling this and destigmatizing talking about our finances. I think, you know, just we talked about like, don't underestimate the power of women. And I think like, I feel it right now. Like, I think there's really something there that us coming together and taking ownership of this for ourselves is going to be a really, really powerful and impactful action within this. I also, you know, I just think it's really fantastic to hear about all the endeavors and to have a better understanding of what's actually available out there, so I can actually advocate for them as well. So I think that that's really great. So thanks again to the panelists. And to organizations like Fairstone for even enabling these types of conversations. So yeah, I'm excited, optimistic, and hopeful about what's possible.
Awesome. Suzanne, any final thoughts?
Love everything that Julie and Saijal said. And I just love this through line about taking personal action and empowering yourself can lead to collective strength and collective action. When we use that power together, we can advocate for the changes that are going to reduce the barriers. And that's going to create the society we want to live in. And I think that individual action to public good line is so important and really what I'm going to take away from this conversation. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie, Saijal, Suzanne. Really, really great dialogue, really great discussion. It was an absolute pleasure hosting you guys. I'm sure the audience learned definitely a few things to help them in the future. I do want to thank the audience for joining us and participating and asking us questions. Final shout out to our fantastic corporate communications team at Fairstone for organizing this event. If you want to watch the discussion again, or if people in your network can benefit from some of the information we shared today, the recording will be available on fairstone.ca. And with that, I'll say thank you for joining and have a fantastic day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Happy International Women's Day.
Bye.
Thank you.